here with
Cleo Sol.
Cleo Sol, who is a young up-and-coming singer from London.
Wow. I felt like I could breathe better after listening to this album.
I was so happy you found this record too.
It's a cleanse.
Yeah.
And I have to say, you've got one of the most amazing voices I've ever heard out of any UK artist.
Wow.
Cleo Sol is a nurturing presence, and for most of her fans and music listeners, she's a beacon of hope and a healer. Musicians have a responsibility to somewhat uphold for the power they wield to manipulate our emotions and lead us towards an ideology that is either damaging or uplifting. In the case of Cleo Sol, she is a musician and that's her gift, but it's merely the medium she chooses to speak her experiences through. Most importantly, she's a mother, a wife, a daughter. And for many of us who use her work as a source of inspiration, she's a muse. Throughout history, muses were the goddesses of music, song, and dance, and a source of inspiration to poets. They were also goddesses of knowledge. As I observe Cleo's work from the outside looking in, and I allow her words to seep into my spirit, I do not feel deceived by her words or by her influences.
Who's been my biggest inspiration? There's a few people, you know, like Destiny's Child.
Yeah.
They inspired me. And Stevie Wonder as well, because he's just like a sick musician.
Yeah.
And yeah, just growing up, loads of different people, loads of different artists, but those are probably the main people.
Nor do I mistrust her intentions. I feel the deep sense of a well-curated allegory that covers the ups and downs of life with a harmonious tone. Through love and care, she speaks life into her words with faith and confidence, using strings and other instrumentation to either cast away harmful or negative thoughts, or use them to amplify the frequencies that uplift her. In a way, I feel like Cleo's praying for me, and she sees something in all of us. Qualities that we should protect and nourish even in a world that's looking to strip that away from us. She told MTV in a rare interview back in 2019, "It's always about being open and letting God work through me at any moment." It appears that Cleo has worked hard for her peace of mind. Cleo often comes from the perspective of talking to her younger self, and she had to walk through the growing pains of life in order to walk into a life of love and abundance. She rediscovered her love for music with her solo efforts, Rose in the Dark, Mother, Heaven, and Gold, as well as her work with the mysterious collective Salt. Her sound feels tribal and free, and I always love that she gives room for the music to breathe. She has an admirable mission to empower and to enrich, to be accepted and to be loved, and to be seen. She's a true palate cleanser and a frequency refresher. I view most of her songs as hymns. A hymn is a type of song, partially synonymous with devotional song, specifically written for the purpose of adoration or prayer, can be addressed to a deity or deities. Very much like muses, hymns can be traced back to Greek mythology. Hymns comes from the Greek word hymnos, which means a song of praise. I also learned during times of slavery, African Americans developed a rich hymn from spirituals, which were the origins of the Black gospel style. One definition of a hymn is a lyric poem reverently and devotionally conceived, which is designed to be sung and which expresses the worshiper's attitude toward God or God's purposes in human life. Through joy, pain, and prayer, there's an unwavering faith in a higher power instilled in Cleo. This faith comforts her and allows her to express her vulnerability and gratitude freely. As a listener, I sense an objective from Cleo to build a foundation with herself first and foremost, and then the people around her. This warm energy that she puts into will feed and nourish her spirit and will radiate through her art. It makes sense why she would gravitate to a warm, groovier, and soulful sound. I've seen tweets from music enthusiasts that I admire that have compared her sound to the great Motown sound, in which highlights the sound of live instrumentation and vocal styles of the 60s and 70s singers. And I became intrigued with how a modern artist will go about crafting a sound that resembles that era. Through modern technology, poetry, and talented musicianship, Cleo and her collaborators are able to achieve a close akin Motown sound sonically by the use of that analog-like 8-track recording sound that is reminiscent of the 1960s and 70s that maintains the soul of the music, which has been absent in many of today's modern music. Records that look to capture a jazzier and soulful sound stick out due to a multiple of reasons. One, it is a different sound than the more modernized drum machine and sound synthesizers that can take away that soul and quality from the music. We understand though that some artists like Cleo choose soul over profit, And sometimes these sounds that are in modern music are a lot cheaper to produce, and some of the live instrument sounds that Cleo favors can be a lot more expensive to produce. And we appreciate that as music listeners because the level of funding and support from most major labels would not allow most artists to embark on the career journey that Cleo is on, which largely attributes to Cleo removing herself from the music industry and from creating music entirely at one point. Having control and letting go of control, you would remind me of the joys of music when I didn't enjoy the creative process at the time, she confides. Referencing the period of time between 2013 and 2017 when she stopped releasing tracks. I let go of limiting beliefs about myself. Music to me is true joy, happiness. It's feeling and it's very spiritual. Making music with you is a dream come true. As the story tells for many artists from the Motown era, that when the sound shifted and music production funding became a lot more scarce, it became a lot harder for music labels to justify the recording costs. These costs aren't as likely for labels to fund when the return of investment may not be as rewarding. And if an artist doesn't want to compromise their artistic vision to receive a bigger label budget to support the music that they want to record, then the chances are they will either have to fund it themselves or it likely won't get produced. In a more modernly take, Jill Scott, her album.
She sold like 5,000. Who is Jill Scott? I think it was like for a year, you know, on Hidden Beach. But then it started picking up and then it became what it became.
The fact that that album came out and it was able to reside in so many people's hearts, despite not meeting sales expectations, was important for other artists to be able to take that same risk on their music. And the reward is how the music touches people. When Cleo decided to return to music after a hiatus, she decided that she was going to make music on her terms. She was asked in a Day's interview, "What do you feel made you stop your career in 2012/2013? What parts of yourself do you feel you kept and let go in order for you to evolve?" Inflo asks his partner in their conversation for their story. Cleo responds, "I wasn't happy," she admits, "and I was attaching my happiness to my music. So I wanted to quit music completely, which still makes me sad when I think about it." For 4 years, she retired from music entirely. She says, "I wasn't being true to myself," the singer confides, "and I was listening to everyone else's advice on my career other than myself. I had lost faith in myself. I didn't know how to pick myself up again." Cleo utilizes bridges and soft-spoken soliloquies to completely transport you to a spiritual awakening, even through all the hurdles and obstacles. She reminds us that nothing is more precious than life itself. The music is suited for those going through hardships and transitional phases, who are looking for guidance in the midst of spiritual warfare. From a vocal perspective, many people highlight the absence of vocalists who grew up with a foundational gospel music background in modern R&B and soul music. Cleo Sol's music resonates within the very essence of gospel music, from the subject matter and how intentional she is with her phrasing, down to the angelic harmonies and choir stacks, and the ability to sustain her notes with a soft and powerful delivery. And for me, Cleo checks many of the boxes that makes her such an outstanding vocalist, from the natural vibrato in her voice that accentuates a color to her words and character. She has a voice that personifies a spirit that shines bright.
Is that musical influence come from the family as well? Has it always been there?
My parents, they met actually in a jazz band.
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of like that kind of thing I always grew up around. My dad playing records, like old reggae records, and my mum playing like old Latin, you know, salsa kind of music. So yeah.
Cleo has a certain one-take style to her vocals, which resembles a straight-to-tape sound. And that has been inspired by the Motown era. Earlier recordings from the mid to late 60s Motown era are known for that 8-track recording sound. Certain techniques they would use to maximize the quality of the vocal in recording and post-production include duplicating the vocals for 2 channels in the recording process. One channel is flat with minimal EQ, and the other would have a lot of high end to it. That is used to add a lot of presence and brightness to the vocal without it feeling over-compressed and over-processed. That straight-to-tape feeling, or that rich, warm, analog sound that you hear in Cleo's work, can be partially achieved by a technique known as vocal writing. This focuses more on changing the dynamics and bringing out its natural sound, instead of compressing and changing the sound. That distortion sound is actually present from hitting the tape too hard during recordings. I researched that how Motown mastered the art of natural distortion in their recordings was actually by accident due to hitting the tape deck too hard during recordings. But artists like Cleo, who are keen on these details, have found a way to achieve this sound in the digital era. That is used by utilizing modern techniques such as reverb emulations and tape delay echoes, and also capturing the frequencies necessary to bring out the right amount of crunch on the drums in live instrumentation. And the minimal processing of the vocals during post-production takes out the frequencies that will make room for the vocals, which are the focal point of the mix. There's also characteristics to achieve a crisp live instrument sound that includes tracking each instrument separately. From a music theory perspective, I think that Cleo's music also highlights Motown's use of the tempo that they wanted to achieve, most notably the grooves and the bass lines, and how they constructed these melodic and rhythmic riffs, and how they used to emphasize a focus on the use of arpeggiated notes, harps and chimes, horn sections, and muffled plucky strings in the bass guitars. All of these components are structured to follow a scale that jazz and soul music derives from, which is the major pentatonic scale, or soul pentatonic. And the use of major and minor thirds and basic jazz and blues sounds bring out different emotions. The major 6th and 7th is used when there's a bright uptick in emotion, usually for the purpose of giving off a rich and harmonious tone. Here are some examples from Amazing Grace and Stevie Wonder that I hear in Don't Let Me Fall from the Mother album.
Why have you engulfed so many hearts? Lonely nights, I still hear the cries from Sherry.
Amazing grace, how sweet.
If I can be free.
All of these elements in Cleo's music, they induce a healing process, and I was really curious on how sound healing and music therapy, the type of effects they have on us and on our body when we're locked in with this type of music, and how it can manipulate our emotions. And the effects that sound healing and music therapy have on us includes increased joy and awe, reduced anxiety. Increased joy and awe, reduced anxiety. It alleviates depression and facilitates in self-reflection to assist in the process of healing trauma. Sound healing works by using specific sound frequencies to stimulate the body's natural healing mechanisms. I found it interesting while I was researching Cleo is that her partner asked her what is the quality that she likes most about herself, and it's her childlike spirit. And I feel like a lot of musicians, artists, poets, anybody that pursues a creative art or field, that the reason why they got into it was that passion and that joy and that childlike spirit and energy, and highlighting the messages and sounds and creative direction that they wanted to pursue before money was a factor. And sometimes money can taint things, and sometimes people come into the process and they want to profit off your talent or your perspective and outlook on art, and that can taint your spirit and your inspiration, and it can take away from what you were designed to do from a purpose perspective. And I like that Cleo gets her inspiration from her religion, she gets it from her spirit, she gets it from her collaborators, from her love, her personal life keeps her going. She wouldn't be able to do music without keeping that spirit alive. And sometimes the message is bigger than us. We feel we have to justify putting in all this time into our work, into our craft, to continue doing that. And the only way to justify that for most of us is whether or not it's making us a profit. And that question, I believe, directly hinders us from showing up in the most authentic way possible. That's the number one message to consider while doing art. What are you doing it for? Who are you doing it for? What do you expect to get out of it in return?